Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Doing the show from the road today. We are getting ready. We're going to be doing a speech this weekend, and very excited about it. So I'm traveling. You get an on-the-road show today, which is very exciting to me. Thus, my portable studio and portable background. Hey, super high end here, and super high quality. But the quality of information remains as high as ever, and I am looking forward to sharing stuff. So I want to hit some updates today. We're going to have my friend Mark Sherwood on a bit, but we really want to update because I've done a bunch of speeches recently, and people are asking me, well, what's going on with MAHA? Where are things? How are they going? You know, what's happening? How's the fight? And there's a lot to talk about there, right? One of the things that we've got to recognize is that the fight is ongoing, and Donald Trump being in office really has not changed too much. There's not as much fight back against us, but the fight is still massive, right? Trump is helping. He's obviously not hurting anything, but the fight was never really. I mean, listen, the Biden administration was awful. They fought us at every step of the way. Democrats in Congress fought us every step of the way, but so did Republicans. Just like the Republicans are fighting Donald Trump on most of his agenda, most of the Republicans are fighting us on the MAHA agenda. So we have a lot of problems and a lot of things that we've got to deal with and a lot of things we've got to address. The fight is incredibly frustrating. We all hoped and thought, well, Trump will get in here and then we can do all these things. We'll see accountability for the COVID vaccines. We'll see accountability for the COVID murders. We're not. We've seen accountability for nothing. We can't even get Jeffrey Epstein's people to get arrested. We can't get child rapists, people who they have video of raping children. We can't even get them arrested right now. So Trump is doing incredible. Elon Musk is doing incredible. There's a number of people in the administration that are doing incredible, but the DOJ is still sitting on their hands, not doing a damn thing. And, there's a ton of pushback for Bobby. Bobby is facing unbelievable things. I mean, can you imagine the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services goes to Medicare, Medicaid and says, hey, I need these files. And Medicare, Medicaid says, no, you can't see them. Really? That's literally what's happened. Bobby literally went there to get certain data, which is critical data. And we needed to be able to sue certain people. We need all sorts of things. And they said, no. Are you kidding? He's their boss, for God's sakes. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine in anything other than a government job going to having the boss come in and say, hey, I need this from you, and saying no? You'd be fired immediately, but not government employees, especially when they have a bunch of judges out there that will rule for anything that the Democrats or any corrupt politician wants. And that seems to be what's happening. Because, well, Renz, file a lawsuit. Well, why? I mean, look what the judges are doing to Trump. You think they're going to suddenly turn and be like, okay, we're going to let the MAHA agenda go because someone's suing? No. If they're blocking Trump and blocking Bobby and blocking all these people from doing everything, they aren't going to do it. They aren't going to suddenly overturn the PrEP Act. It just isn't going to happen. So we've got a lot to do, but we are fighting and we're seeing a lot of success. Trump's success has emboldened a lot of state legislatures and a lot of people. And so we are seeing people that are starting to recognize what's going on. We're seeing all sorts of things. Take the geoengineering bill in Florida, which is looking very promising. Governor DeSantis has backed it. A lot of people are backing it. But, every time there's good, there's bad. Matt Gaetz today talked about the fact that Florida is considering a bill to give vaccine-like immunity to these chemical sprayers and pesticide sprayers. That's a disaster. That's a disaster. And the question would be, depending on what they're spraying in the skies, would that immunity then extend to the chemtrails? I don't know. It's unclear yet. But there's a lot happening here. And we really need to start unpacking. So we're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about it in depth. I'm going to tell you what I see as an attorney, what I see as an issue, where we can go and how we can do these things. That's really the key topic today. So it's a big show, a lot to talk about here. And I'm really looking forward to kind of digging into this because, like I said, I did a bunch of speeches last weekend, got a speech this weekend. What I'm hearing from we the people is, okay, when are we going to start getting things done? And the answer is something that I don't know. It depends. We're trying as hard as we can. We're trying to work with the administration to get things, but the administration is being stifled at every step. And the deep state, the powers that be, man, are they doing some nasty stuff. They are pulling out all the stops. So Anyways, before we get going, please consider supporting us. GiveSendGo.com/RensLaw, GiveSendGo.com/RensLaw, and TomRens.com. And you have to type TomRens.com. You can't just search Tom Rens. You won't get it. Google suppresses it. They hide us. There's no finding TomRens.com by searching for Tom Rens. Please consider supporting us, particularly click on Shop, go to our affiliates page, and check out today, of course, the Kingdom Fuel. We got Mark Sherwood on. We got all sorts of great things happening. So, make sure you're checking out Kingdom Fuel, the Kingdom Fuel products, all the different things. Check out all our affiliates. All of these guys are great people. They support us. We support them. And they're just wonderful, wonderful people. And don't forget to check out our sponsors, Kirk Elliott and Satphone. And also, there's so many good people. Just make sure you're supporting everybody on there. All right. Without further, listen, GiveSendGo.com/RensLaw and TomRens.com. We need people to consider becoming monthly donors. Your monthly support, $20 a month, makes a huge difference to us. Please consider doing that. It's not a huge expense, but it makes a big difference in the freedom fight. And the freedom fight is ongoing. We're continuing to support Donald Trump. We're continuing to support MAGA. We're continuing to support MAHA, and we're fighting for it. But there's only so much that can be done. So we're doing a lot of work on that. We're going to talk about some of that today. All right. So let's look at the MAHA agenda, right? And MAHA agenda is really about making people healthy. And being healthy means we have to deal with all of the issues. Vaccines are a disaster, and things are worse. Fluoride in water, reasons that are in our water supply are bad. What they're spraying in the air is no good. The pollution in the air. There's a lot of questions about the safety and efficacy of they call it the 5G, but it's not actually that. It's the massive amount of RF radiation in our atmosphere. There's issues with the chemtrails. What are they? Where are they coming from? I'm going to touch on some of that in a second. The food. I saw another thing today. They're saying, because there's a big push to move to beef tallow. Well, the beef tallow needs to be, first of all, it needs to be organic beef tallow from good places, right? Because if the beef's been poisoned by eating a bunch of glyphosate, saturated foods and other such things, and if they've given mRNA and this, that, and other, that tallow may not be any good. We don't know. A lot of nuance to these different arguments. Everybody wants to just look for a simple solution. There is no simple solution. There is no simple, it's complicated. Everything we're doing and fighting for is complicated. And so we need to recognize that and get past the 15-second soundbite and get to the actual crux of the problems. We're doing that. I'm proud to be working with Global Wellness Forum and a number of other people to get some of these things done. We're working all over the country, but we have a lot more to do, a lot more. So let's start out a little bit with the seed oils. With the seed oils, one of the things that's occurring is seed oils are very, very dangerous, but they're not dangerous because eating peanut oil is going to poison you. It's because the peanut oil or whatever the seed oil is, pick your seed oil. What they do is they process the seed oil. And much like everything else, it's the processing that causes the problems or the fact that the plants were genetically modified before they harvested the oil. Almost all of our crops are GMO at this point, almost all of them. You have to understand that just everything that we've got out there is GMO from one way or the other. It's all GMO. So you're starting out with some seed oil from a plant that's been genetically modified. Then the plant sits in the field and it's sprayed with glyphosate or whatever else there is, which is no good. The soil's poisoned from the glyphosate or whatever else they're spraying on the fields, and that gets taken into the plant. So by the time the seed oil even is harvested, it's already been exposed to a lot of things that are questionable. Are these things good or bad for you? The seed oil then goes to the processing plant, where they process it with a whole bunch of chemicals, a whole bunch of additives, and a whole bunch of other things. Now, these chemicals, additives, and processing processes are not necessarily safe. They don't even look or care if they're safe. That's not the point for them. The people doing this, they don't care. It's all about profit, right? So the farmers have been told the only thing that matters is yield because that's their bottom line, right? The more soybeans they grow, the more whatever they grow, the more money they make. And that's what the farmers are working on. Now, in fairness, for the small guys, there's no margins. See, our government has done everything they can to destroy small farmers, family farmers, everything else. So what's happened is the big guys are focused on yield because they don't care about anything but the bottom line. And the small guys have to focus on yield because the government's made it unaffordable for small farms to exist. There's a reason Bill Gates and China have bought all our farmland. They want to control what's in our food supply to make us unhealthy. They're doing that very successfully. So the big guys, they buy all of our farmland and they use these GMO crops that they're not even sort of like what we would get anywhere else. If you go to other countries and if you buy heirloom seeds, you find, that you can eat these things, you don't feel bad. That's why people say, hey, I went to Italy and I ate a whole bunch of pasta and I feel great. I come back here, eat the same thing, and I thought I was going to die. Well, the reason for that is our plants are genetically modified and grown in poisoned soil with poison all over them. And by the time we get them into our bellies, there's nothing about them that's natural. We're eating a whole bunch of poison chemicals that make us sick, which isn't a surprise because Bayer and AstraZeneca and a bunch of these people, they are the seed producers. Big Pharma owns Big Ag. They produce the seeds, they produce the medicines that go in the animals. And so they poison us with the food, and then we're dependent on their Big Pharma solutions because we're sick from what we're eating. You got to understand the complexity of MAHA. MAHA is there, and it's got to unravel this very complicated scheme that's very hard to put into a succinct soundbite. It's just not easy to do. So the problem, when we come on the media, when we come on to shows, when we do our things, in particular, so let's say I'm doing, I don't know, I pick your media outlet and I'm doing an interview. Well, most of the media is short form. So let's say you were to go on Fox News, not that they'll let me talk about this stuff. Well, they're going to ask you a series of questions. You may have a 5-10 minute hit. Those questions they're going to ask you, you have maybe 15 to 30 seconds to answer the question. So it's hard to get into the nuance of this because the format doesn't allow it. So people watch it, they get their thing. MAHA, oh, we're going to make everybody healthy. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to eat organic food. Well, what they don't realize is, for example, any meat that's produced can be labeled organic, even if it's given genetically modifying vaccines. There's an exemption for vaccines in the meat for the Organic Food Act. So if you buy organic beef, it doesn't mean it's not vaccinated with a potentially genetically modifying vaccine. Nobody's testing these things properly. Nobody's checking these things. So you're not actually getting anything organic. And there's sort of exemptions to the Organic Food Act across the board. But the reality is that organic food is very rarely organic food. So as we start unraveling it, it becomes very difficult because getting control of the media narrative is difficult because these scientists and these pharmaceutical, what they do is so complicated, it's very hard to convey to people. So most people don't realize what's happening. They don't realize they're being poisoned from 100 different directions. And unless you're truly MAHA and truly into this issue, it becomes a problem. I'm today talking, and I want to talk to you guys, those of you that are truly into MAHA, truly want to be healthy and make America healthy again. This is kind of what we're facing. And with the Global Wellness Forum, we're looking at all these issues, but they're comprehensive and they're complex, and it's not a simple thing. So we have to address these things in ways that are going to be effective, but that's tough to do. So again, going back to these seed oils, by the time you get a seed oil, I'm guessing, I can't say this for sure, but I'm guessing that if we took a truly heirloom soybean and we grew it in clean soil, and it wasn't genetically modified in any way, and we didn't allow any sort of poisons to be sprayed on it, and then we harvested it, and we harvested the oil in a way that didn't add a whole bunch of chemicals or poison it or damage it, I'm guessing that soybean oil might not be as bad. But you can't buy that product. It doesn't exist. They don't sell that sort of a product. So seed oils are bad. Now we have the push for tallow. Well, there's not enough tallow out there to replace seed oil. It's probably much better than the seed oils. natural tallow because at least it goes through the animal's digestive system, which filters out a lot of the crap. But I believe last year there was 1 billion pounds of tallow produced and 15 billion pounds of seed oil. There's not enough tallow to replace the seed oil. So the farmers, and understand when we talk about the farmers, I want to distinguish between the farmers that I knew growing up, the guys who have local farms, who are doing their best to feed America, who are doing their best to take care of America, and the Bill Gates corporate farms. The Bill Gates corporate farms are downright evil. They don't care what they have to do as long as they're maximizing yield and ensuring that they get product out and it maximizes profit. They do not care. And in fact, I would argue that they're willing to even sacrifice some of the profit on the front end because they know their investments on Big Pharma are going to make money on the back end. So these seed oils are a disaster, not because necessarily soybean oil is bad, but soybean oil grown in from a genetically modified soybean and then processed in a plant that's poisoning the hell out of it is not a good thing. So that's kind of an issue. And I want to bring on Mark first of all to talk to him a little bit about this because he knows all sorts of stuff about this. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing well, Tom. It's good to see you, man.
You too. And we're unraveling MAHA today. We're talking about the challenges and the fight and everything we're doing. And we're kind of hitting a bunch of different things and kind of updating on the fight. And I'm talking about the complexity of the fight. And one of the things that I'm starting out with is I'm talking about the seed oils. Yeah. Seed oils are a complicated issue because, I would suggest this, and I'm curious about your reaction as a scientist. So if we were to take a non-GMO soybean and to grow it in soil that wasn't poisoned with glyphosate or anything else, and to grow it in a place where it wasn't being sprayed with all sorts of other poisons. Then we were to harvest that soybean and to get the oil in a pure form where it wasn't processed with a bunch of chemicals in a dangerous chemical factory, that soil might not be that seed oil might not actually be all that bad. Would you agree with that?
I would. That's correct. And people need to know also that the soybean in its current genetically altered state actually has the ability to bind to what's called your estrogen receptors, which creates proliferation. And people need to understand that. And so a lot of things out here today are made with soybean oil products. And you mentioned the improper harvesting of the oil, which creates a burn product. But it all comes from, I'll use a term like an attorney term. It's fruit of the poisonous tree. It really is. It's the whole process. So interestingly enough, in the soy that's harvested in a manner that you described is going to bind to an estrogen receptor that is anti-proliferative. So there's an alpha and a beta. So the modified binds to alpha, proliferates. The non-modified binds to beta, protective. So it's funny how we've taken something that's protective from even a hormonal standpoint, turned it into something that's dangerous from a hormonal standpoint. And Tom, this is one of the keys, I believe, a key component among others that's leading to the feminization, if you will, of America, and also the early puberty arrival of people today.
Absolutely, 100%. And part of the war on men for sure. But this is across the board. I would say that this applies. By the way, everybody, go to Sherwood TV/Tom Renz or go to tomrenz.com and click on our affiliate link and support Mark. He's got the best products on the market. Just wonderful. I love the Kingdom Fuel, the Kingdom Candy, the H2, all this stuff. Great stuff. Make sure you're supporting that. Make sure you're checking that out. By the way, he doesn't use genetically modified soybean oil to poison you.
Nor do I eat it. I don't, man. Yeah. I'm all man.
Yeah, there you go. So that's kind of a thing. But we see this across the board, right? We see this across the board. It's not just in seed oils. I use seed oils as an example because, the discussion about moving to tallow, well, that's nice, but there's not enough tallow available to replace seed oils. And, the same issue is applying on, I think, a lesser level to tallow. I think tallow is probably better because it goes through the animal's digestive system and that cleans out some of the crap. Yeah. But we're also injecting our animals with all sorts of vaccines and poisons and different things that's making even the tallow is less safe than it should be. It should be a very safe and good product, but instead it's kind of more marginal because we keep messing with it. So
that's been one of my contentions with people today, even going down the pathway of these hardcore carnivore diets, and I'm not anti-carnivore at all. I like meat, I eat it, I'm good.
I
But
love the carnivore stuff, but
always
yeah,
like saying to people, be careful, because wherever the beef is sourced, you will find that what the cow ate, you will also get to eat. And if it eats the cow, it will probably eat you too. And so most of the cows today are really fattened up with all the things you just talked about in a fast, rapid move, and they're sold by weight as opposed to sold by health. And where do toxins get stored? You nailed it, right there in the fat tissue. So I'm not convinced that it's just a free pass to eat meat, but I think there needs to be some caution in these areas that you just talked about.
100%, 100%. Well, I'm sticking with the meat because it's all I got, and we haven't found anything else that's healthy either.
Yeah,
but so as I'm looking at this stuff, it's not just the meat, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the meat. We're seeing the attack on our health is coming from every direction. One of the other areas that we've been talking a lot about is what they're spraying in the air. And one of the things that's big is we're up to, I think, 32 states now that have legislation that they're working on that would ban chemtrails and chemical spraying and weather manipulation, those sorts of things. And that's a really big deal. And it's interesting because we're up to 32 states working on banning it. Yet the mainstream is still trying to tell us that when we look up and see chemtrails that have been there for 14 hours, that it doesn't exist. I mean, look up, right? Okay. I mean, this isn't complicated. And it's one thing to say that contrails are real. We know contrails are real. Contrails are absolutely a real thing. Contrails and chemtrails we need to distinguish, right? So a contrail is when an airplane flies through certain areas and the weather conditions are right, it leaves that jet stream behind it. That jet stream is created as a result of the soot that comes out of the exhaust of the airplane, the heat, the pressure, and everything else that comes from a jet flying through. And it creates this kind of condensation thing where there's certain atmospheric conditions. And depending on the atmospheric condition, that contrail can persist for a period of time. What it can't do is almost never can it persist for hours on end.
No.
The statistical chances of a contrail existing for hours on end over the course of hundreds of miles, almost never. Most contrails should dissipate within, usually in a minute or two. Some can persist, 30 minutes, even up to 2 hours is about the max that anything could actually persist realistically on any sort of a wide scale. If you're seeing zigzags, though, that's not natural. If you're seeing it start and stop abruptly, that's not natural, because the way that this works is the contrails can exist and persist in areas where there's super ice saturation. These highly saturated, highly humid, very specific weather conditions in the upper troposphere. And those conditions, they're rare. And I guess the simplest way, because I've been doing a deep dive on the science on this, the easiest way to understand this is look up and watch the clouds move. If you see clouds moving quickly and you see chemtrails not moving, or chemtrails just turning into giant clouds all over the place, then you know there's something going on, right? If you see zigzag patterns with hard starts and stops, you know there's something going on. Then you have to start asking, are they chemtrails? Now, they've modified the fuel over the years, so there are certain questions, as to how that fuel modification is impacting the presence of chem contrails. But there's no question that at least in some areas, they are absolutely spraying chemicals. The evidence is abundant. I mean, there's been studies, there's been people who've ran tests and found that, one guy ran a test, found that there was 87,000 times higher saturation of aluminum than there's, the normal baselines in California. We just saw Mike Adams and Jane Ruby are testing some things down out of Florida, and they're finding some crazy stuff. Now, can I say for sure that their tests are perfect? I don't know. Mike does great work, and Mike's a great scientist. So, if Mike's doing it, I have a lot of faith in him. But regardless, it's inarguable that in certain instances they're spraying things. And let's just take them at their word. Let's take John Brennan at his word. When he was running the CIA under Obama, he actually said that solar radiation management is the way to go because it's cheap, it's inexpensive, we can do it wherever. Well, that's the CIA. So remember, they don't have to disclose under a FOIA or anything else if they're doing that. And it's not going to show up on the flight tracker. It's not going to show up in NOAA. It's not going to show up anywhere. They've got national security exemptions under the law. Same with the DOD. If the DOD or if CIA or any of these guys are running these planes, you will not see a report and you cannot FOIA it, right? So we know that this stuff's happening because we have evidence that it's happening. We know that you wouldn't be able to track it, so they just call it a conspiracy theory, just like they called mRNA a conspiracy theory. They said the COVID jab's a conspiracy theory, masks are everything's a conspiracy theory until we prove it to be correct. And I can prove to you that the chemtrails are a real thing in certain circumstances. Now, the prevalence of chemtrails versus contrails, I'm not there yet. I can't prove it all. But there are chemtrails being sprayed. We're being sprayed all over the place. We don't know what or how. But let's take John Brennan at his word, which is a bit of a stretch, and let's assume that he's right and they're spraying a bunch of stuff, solar radiation management, right? So if that's happening, then I want you to think about this. The two most likely things that they're spraying are sulfur-based and aluminum-based chemicals. And so the sulfur-based can persist in the air for over 2 years. The aluminum, we don't know how long that can persist. But aluminum's a neurotoxin. Sulfur creates acid rain. These aren't exactly safe, are they?
They're not safe. And, it's interesting. I was in Mexico a while back, and I've said this before, but my wife and I were looking up the sky. And we get so used to seeing these chemtrails, we just stop thinking about them. That's the truth. These contrails, I should say, right? And so contrails and chemtrails. But what you see in there, as you look up, we commented on it. You see some of these contrails that come across, and they're sort of more vague on the back end, more pronounced on the front end.
Yeah.
You sometimes see them real time. Yeah. And then sometimes they'll hang out for a little bit, and 30, 40 minutes, you'll see them go away. They'll eventually fragment away and drift. And you can see that happening. We didn't see these tic-tac-toe symbols up in the sky. But you get back in America, you see those so many times, and we've just kind of become numb to it because they're so ubiquitous now. And I wonder, because like we know the aerospace is really controlled at the federal level, not the state level. So we have a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of areas that even if the states do pass legislation, what does that mean? I always question, what does that mean? Does that mean anything? But
it means a lot.
Yeah, we need to figure it out, because right now, you look at the way that all these toxins that you mentioned, not just from soy, but the atmosphere as well, they are really destroying mankind's ability to have an opportunity to have a healthy life.
Well, let me explain to you why they matter, right? So a lawyer's perspective, this is where a guy like me comes in, right?
Yep.
Because, I can't do the science. I just follow the evidence. So someone else does the science. I read the science. I figure out what evidence is real and what isn't, and then I go after it. So the value of the state legislation cannot be overstated. It's critical. We need to pass these. Now, there's two reasons. One is that some of this appears to be being done through public-private partnerships, and particularly with offshore NGOs, right? Now, the state legislation may, depending on the nature of it, allow us to sue them. And at minimum, it would allow us to potentially get to what's called subject matter discovery to find out who's doing it. Now, if it's a federal government, if it's a federal issue, then you're right, we can't stop them with state law. But remember, they're denying that chemtrails exist. Well, if they persist after that legislation is passed, then we have a good reason to pursue litigation, right? We have a good reason to dig into things. At minimum, then, what we would be able to do is prove that the feds are lying. We know they're lying, but the question isn't whether we know it, because we know that the feds lie to us about everything. The question isn't whether they're lying. The question is, can we prove it so that we can force action? That's the key here, and that's part of the game. The state level will also allow us to hit some of these guys who are doing it on the private side. We can take action to stop the guys who are doing it on the private side. And then if the chemtrails are persisting, if we can still test and find that they're spraying chemicals, then we know where it's coming from. Now, I already know, because I can tell you that we had Brennan, we have all these guys, we have all this that was done. You can follow the law. And you can see where Biden decided that climate change was a national security issue and started allowing our DOD and military to start doing this without telling anybody, because they knew that people would have a fit if we had Bill Gates spraying, aluminum poison up in the sky and poisoning everybody. I mean, what's that going to do to autism rates? But here's the thing. If we can pass these state laws, it's going to allow us to deal with this on a federal level in a little bit different way, because we can at least find out who's responsible. The feds don't have to admit anything if it's national security and classified, but it becomes manifest. Listen, it's no private groups doing it. We can't do it. And subject matter discovery says it's federal and that we can't know anything more than that. Okay, so then we can pressure our federal legislature, federal people to do something. But the key here is we've got to get this. We've got to clarify this. This is a really complicated scheme, and it's kind of like what they did with COVID. They run a lot of this stuff through the DOD because they know that we don't get access to the information. They're weaponizing the DOD against the American people without anybody knowing, the CIA. And the problem is that even with Pete Hegseth being in place and Tulsi Gabbard being in place, unless they're looking for very specific information and know where to look, they're probably not going to see this. And we saw with Bobby Kennedy when he went to the CMS people and said, hey, give me your Medicare data on the vaccines. They said, no. What do you mean, no? Well, that's what they said. And do you think that the CIA is going to do any different? Do you think the CIA is going to be forthcoming about poisoning the American people? Hell no, they're not going to. Hell no. What they're going to do is they're going to lie through their teeth. But the law is there. The law tells us once it was called a national security issue, that allowed our national security apparatus to step in and to classify projects and to work with international NGOs, this, that, and other, in off-book capacity and other capacity. So until we get someone who's going to look for this issue the proper way, it's not going to be manifest. And even DOGE, God bless them, may not be able to uncover this sort of thing because of the way that they run it. Now, we know that the funding also exists because the funding was there through the Green New Deal that Biden passed. I mean, when we passed that, when Congress just bent over and gave him whatever he wanted, they really allowed Biden to have the funding to. What do you think USAID was funding? Do you think it's just condoms and for the Taliban? No. USAID was funding all sorts of things that are dangerous against the American people. So you've got to understand that the deep state is a real thing, and they are taking steps to make America less healthy. And if they weren't, why the secrecy? Why do you have to run this in that way? Why can't we find out what you're spraying? We can see you're spraying. We know you're spraying. It's physically impossible to have chemtrails all over the country that persist for 8 to 12 hours or more. And to argue that that's a natural occurrence. So the question is, what are we spraying and what's it doing? Mark, what sort of an impact? Because the aluminum-based sprays for solar radiation management are one of the most likely sprays. What sort of impact does aluminum have?
Look at aluminum as a neurotoxin, which you correctly pointed out. We know it gets stored in our fat tissue. So toxins get stored in fat.
like
We
beef
also
tallow.
know, yeah, we also know that aluminum is an inhibitor of the methylation pathway. And for people that are like, what's the methylation pathway? Well, that is a pathway or a biochemical response that occurs billions of times per second inside every cell in the body. It's responsible for all the following. So, watch what I say. Aluminum impairs methylation. So, therefore, lack of proper methylation leads to imbalances of neurotransmitters. I'm talking about serotonin and dopamine, can make us depressed, can make us attention deficit, can even make us hopeless or even suicidal. Secondly, it impairs the ability for us to detoxify, specifically with hormones, leading to the genesis of multiple cancers, including breast cancers. Thirdly, it does lend itself to a lack of production of creatine within that cycle, which gives us lower ability to hold muscle tissue. And fourthly, you get this concept of autism. Anyone on the autism spectrum disorder does not methylate correctly. So you've got all these cause, and I get it, they're association effects, but we do know that aluminum directly does impact the methylation system and will impart a slow function in that, so, or block it. So there you go. There's a lot there to unpack.
Yeah, no question. So we're seeing this kind of, like, again, this is just part of the whole, part of the larger picture. And when we talk about MAHA, and understand this is an update on the fight. Why are we pushing for geoengineering bills on the state level? Well, because if we can pass those, it moves us a step closer on that particular fight. Why are we talking about seed oils? Well, it's just a great example.
Mm-hmm.
It ties in with organic food and healthy food versus unhealthy food. But it's a great illustration of the issues we face with MAHA. And, some of these are things that have to be exposed publicly, and we have to have regulatory or legislative change. Some of this I can't fix in a courtroom. And one of the things that I said early on in the show was, listen, you got judges who are wildly conflicted, issuing rulings against Trump that are completely beyond the separation of powers. I mean, this Boasberg clown and some of these other guys, what they've done are ridiculous, in my opinion. Do you really think that those same judges are going to allow us to get anywhere in the courts if we challenge, some of these other issues? And the answer is no. So we've got to get further. We've got to have more exposure and more evidence before I can do something in a courtroom with this. Once I've got a smoking gun or something closer to a smoking gun, and we're getting closer every day, by the way, but once I have it, then we can look at what we can do in the courts, but we can also continue to apply pressure legislatively and through the regulatory process, which is why I always talk about lawfare. Lawfare in its ethical form is not suing crappy lawsuits to screw someone over. Ethical lawfare means using every component of the law and public opinion to help shape policy and reform and to fight for our health and our freedom. That's what we're doing. That's how we're approaching this. We're trying to be a little bit smarter than the average bear in this. So we are fighting very hard, but we're fighting on a lot of fronts, and there's a lot of interconnectedness in this. Now let's throw in one that's a little bit less controversial, right? So we say, okay, we're talking about the issues with food, and we're talking about the issues with, I don't know, pick your problem, pick your poison. But now let's consider this. We've got the COVID vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule. Now, Mary Tyler Bowden was just with Tucker, and we just saw Suzanne, what's her name, with Joe Rogan. So the vaccines are really starting to get a little bit more play, and that's good because they are a critical component to damaging our health, right? I've done some work recently, and I've looked. There are zero, I mean absolutely zero, studies, clinical controlled, randomized, placebo, double-blinded studies that have tested the absolute risk reduction for death, for symptomatic disease, or for transmission for any vaccines. None. There are none, not one. So the idea that any vaccine is science, that we can follow the science and come to any realistic conclusion about any vaccine is absurd. There is no science. How can you say you're following the science when there is none? Bill Cassidy, when he was lying about Bobby Kennedy and pushing him on these vaccines, is nothing but a pharma sellout. He's supposedly, I believe he's a doctor, right? So this is a doctor who's so bad at what he does that he doesn't realize that there are no clinical controlled randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials checking on the absolute risk reduction of symptomatic disease, death, or transmission for any vaccine out there. Yet this clown sits in Congress and says, well, you're not going to undermine the science on vaccines. What science is that?
Yeah.
What science? Mark, as a scientist, as a someone who's taking care of people's health, do you when you look, hey, I got to figure out a way to help someone be healthy?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you look at any of these outcomes, for any of the products you're recommending? I mean, I would think that absolute risk reduction of, say, death or symptomatic disease or transmission is probably an important one. What do you think? Am I missing something?
No, the absolute risk is what you should be looking at, in contrast to what they do look at, which is relative risk. And I kind of went over that before. That relative risk is a skew on numbers to create the bias you want, and it'll credit the outcome you want. For example, you got 1,000 people here, 1,000 people here. You give them a drug, you randomize it, blind it, placebo controlled, all that stuff, and you follow it for a period of time. Let's say there were 2 people in one group that had an event, that you didn't like, and 1 person in the other group you had an event didn't like. That means that 99.9% of the time that thing didn't do anything. It did nothing. That's absolute. But relative, they would pull out the 2 that had events here and the one of the 2 that had events here. And so you'd have, since 2 had it here and 1 had it here, that's a 50% relative reduction. So it's relative to this as opposed to a study. And that's how these studies are done. So I do look at them. I look at this a lot. And frankly, the majority of the studies I look at are very biased.
Yeah, 100%. And listen, the scientists doing these studies and big pharma all know this. Now, there's an argument to be made whether doctors are aware of this, because they get the end result. They just get a little summary sheet, and most of them don't bother doing any homework beyond that. But, I mean, if you're a respected doctor and you're going to speak out on the issue as an expert, don't you think maybe you ought to do some homework? Why is it that I know more about it as an attorney than you do as a doctor? Why is it that if I said to Bill Cassidy, hey, can you point to me to any randomized studies that would gold standard studies? Can you point to me to any gold standard studies on vaccines? And he'd say he wouldn't. I'll bet you dimes to dollars that this clown wouldn't even know. I bet he wouldn't even know.
No, Tom, that is, it's in that world. There's a level of arrogance that is inherent to that doesn't want to be questioned. And anytime you challenge anyone's culture, what they believe in today's world, pride puts that wall up, and there's not a ability to listen and dialogue. And right now, I would say pride comes before a fall. And this is why our nation is having so much problem right now, because people that are learning, you're sitting down in front of Mr. Cassidy here, and saying, hey, can you show me this? And if he can't, and the answer is no, then maybe he can learn something. Maybe you can learn something if he can. And that dialogue needs to happen, but there's so much pride right now, it's not happening. And that is hurting us so deeply right now. Then that right there, what you said, has got me very grieved about it.
It's horrific. I mean, it's terrific. And this is it's permeating where we are on so many different things. Now, people are talking about the COVID vaccines and some of these other vaccines. I get a lot of people, hey, when are we going to get justice? My cousin, my friend, my this, my that died from the COVID vaccine. Hey, I'm sick from the COVID vaccine. When am I going to get justice? We got Bobby's there. Can you sue him? Nope. Nothing's changed. Nothing has changed. Nothing. Legally, I have absolutely no more capacity to sue Big Pharma right now for the COVID vaccines than I did under Biden. So, I mean, until we get some shifts, some data. Now, that's not to say Bobby's not doing a good job or that he won't get there. It's that right now, no. The answer is I cannot sue. Nothing's changed that would make the case go any differently than it would before. Now we're making progress on a lot of these things, and that's a key thing. And now one thing that is different is because Bobby's there and because we have a new administration, when we're working through the case process, there should be less opposition to these cases, which will allow us to get more done. But that's a huge deal. But it takes a long time, and it's very expensive to move these cases in this kind of inch by inch basis. I'm going to get more into this. Mark, I know you got to jump, but I really appreciate I really needed your expertise on a couple of these because I wanted to back up what I was saying from an actual scientist. Everybody, make sure TomRenz.com. Make sure you go onto the shop and then to the affiliate page. Check out Kingdom Everything, Kingdom Fuel, Kingdom Candy, Kingdom Everything. I love this stuff. It's great stuff. It's healthy. There's no poisons in that. You want to be healthy, you got to eat healthy, and that's the start of it. Mark, anything else you got going on you want to get out there?
No, I think you did a terrific job breaking those things down, Tom, and I appreciate you allowing me to chime in there, offer a little color commentary. And I think the word of today for people is you got to find that narrow road that leads to health and realize there's not many people that are on it right now, and decide in your own life you're going to lead the way. Somebody's got to do it. If not you, then who? And so I think that's a good place to start a day right there. So be the leader out there and realize the government is not going to do it for you. There's a long, long way to go before you're going to see any change of it all. And so I could not be more in agreement with you on that one, Tom.
100%. Well, Mark, I appreciate you being there with us. I appreciate everything that you do. I appreciate your continued fight. And we'll see you next week.
Sounds great, Tom. Have a good day, man.
Thank you, sir. All right. So let's talk about litigation on this, right? So Bobby is being in place is a huge deal, and that's going to help us. But right now, one of the things I need you all to understand is what's going on. That PrEP Act, that's a foundational issue, right? And it really prevents a lot of things. Now, I had someone in the comment asked a really, really, really important question. Two of them, actually. It's Truth Warrior, if you're listening. First one is lots of controlled opposition shills coming out now to lead the movement down a dead end. Okay, so I want to first of all talk about that, because one of the things we got to talk about within the fight is this whole concept of controlled opposition, this, that, and other. And I want to tell you guys this. So here's how I've always handled this. If you are in favor of making America healthy again, and you're speaking out about it, not everybody is going to be as effective as everybody else, right? Some people are very good, well-meaning people who just have bad ideas. It doesn't mean they're evil. It doesn't mean they're controlled op. It just means that they've got bad ideas. I'm grateful for anybody that's speaking out. I'm not going to fight with our team. I have too many bad guys to fight. I'm fighting with big pharma. I'm fighting with these globalist billionaires. I want to focus on the guys that I know are evil. Later, I'll worry about who is the purest on our side. I just don't need to get into the infighting right now. And for anybody that is infighting, my question to you is, if you're not controlled opposition, shouldn't you be aiming your guns at the evil instead of, a circular firing squad? We need that. So what I would urge anybody, if you want to ask, and kind of dig, are they controlled opposition or not? And I don't think this is a definitive test. But if you're sniping at other pro-health, pro-freedom, pro-America people, maybe who aren't, they're not necessarily opposed to our ideas. They're just saying we got to go a different direction. If you're sniping at your own, I don't know if you're controlled opposition, but you're certainly a pain in the ass, and you're not helping the fight. So don't do that. I'm not doing that. I would ask other people not to do that. The other thing I would say is that, remember, just because someone's less effective or has a bad idea doesn't mean that they're evil. It's just sometimes these are complicated issues, and there is no one right way to fix it. We just all got to keep working to fight and to fix it, right? The other thing that Truth Warrior asked me is, isn't it a constitutional issue? People have a right to security of the person and not to be poisoned, don't they? I would say it's absolutely the case, but remember something. This is kind of a new area of the law. When the Constitution was written, no one was talking about someone genetically engineering our food to poison us, right? Nobody was talking about spraying chemtrails because that stuff didn't exist back then. So there wasn't clearly established precedent or discussion in the Constitution. Because of that, the courts, and understand this, there's two ways to look at this. One is someone who, is kind of friendly to the courts, say, well, listen, the courts have historically, they don't like to create things that aren't there, especially with the Constitution. They're very reticent about doing that. So, it's a tough road to even get a good jurist to start reading things into the Constitution that weren't there when it started, right? If you're a little bit more skeptical and a little more cynical, which I tend to be, I would point this out. Look at the way the courts are behaving on some of these major issues of the day. We have a lot of jurists in the courts that are activists. They're not fighting for the Constitution. They're not fighting for freedom. They're not fighting for the rule of law. They're fighting for their position, and they're fighting for it. And that's not the role of a judge. A judge shouldn't be fighting for anything. A judge's job is to impartially make a decision related to the law and the facts of a case. That's it. That's all they do. So anything more than that is awful. So what are we going to do with that, right? Yes, I would argue that you have a number of constitutional rights related to your bodily integrity and to your health. And I have argued it, and I'll continue to argue it. But you have to understand, you're not going to go in front of a leftist activist judge and get them to suddenly come out and say, oh, yeah, you're right. We're going to overturn all COVID vaccines. We're going to overturn the PrEP Act because of this. They just won't do it. So we have to do this a different way, right? The definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result. I don't want to waste my time acting as an insane person. I want to get something done. So we're working on different things. So we push state legislative initiatives. We push local initiatives. We work to create political pressure, because if we change the law, then the courts have no way to dodge it, right? So if we can get anywhere with the law changes, we're in a good spot. It's really critical that we do that. Now, that leads us to the problem of the Republicans who won't do anything. They're the most inept group of people I've ever seen. I mean, Mike Johnson giving them a break this week is absolutely absurd. Let's go home because we don't want this rules package nonsense. And I get it. So listen, you get this fight between him and Anna Paulina Luna. I like her generally, but this nonsense about proxy voting is garbage. Get your ass to Congress and vote. If you can't, tough. You want to make babies, then don't be a congressman. I don't know what else to say. Or, find a way to prioritize it. It's just, you can't have everything in life. Sometimes you just don't get everything you want. That whole thing, but that isn't the issue. That isn't the only issue. At the same time, the real reason Johnson didn't do this is because he had a bunch of sellout rhinos that wouldn't back what Trump wanted done. These guys wouldn't back Trump. They wouldn't back what Trump wanted done. These were rhino sellouts. And they are the real enemy right now. The reason we can't get anything done is because the Republican Party is full of people that aren't Republicans, that aren't MAGA, that aren't pro-America first. They're people, look at what just happened in the Senate. We just had the Senate vote to block Trump's tariffs. Are you kidding me? What, because the way we've been doing it is better? At this point, I'm willing to try just about anything to make some changes. We've got to make changes. The way we're doing it ain't working. So I don't care what they change. We just need to change something. But yet the GOP voted against Trump. We can't make America healthy again when we're fighting amongst ourselves. And the infighting starts with the GOP that does not support MAGA. It's not even infighting. They're just sellouts. We have a bunch of crooks. McConnell, Collins, Murkowski, and what the hell is Rand Paul doing? Rand Paul, he's conservative, he's patriot, right up to the point that he finds a real political issue that he's got to stay on, right? This was what Rand Paul did on that vote was absolutely appalling. No pun intended. It was just garbage. That should never have happened. And if you're voting with Murkowski, Collins, and McConnell, and they're the only ones you're voting with, you should know inherently whatever you're doing is anti-America First. No America First person. If they're voting for it, it's just not America First. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that. So this whole thing is nonsensical. It's garbage to me. I don't know what's going on with it, but we've got to get this fixed. And the way to do it is what we're doing, right? We'll launch lawsuits anytime and every time they're going to be effective or useful. We're going to push for political change, and particularly passing legislation on the state level. That's something we've got to fight. And we've got to make sure but we've got to make sure it's real, right? So we've got to make sure we're going to pass this geoengineering bill down in Florida. But guess what, Florida? You can't pass the pesticide immunity nonsense because we're all looking at geoengineering. Okay, we can't have that. So, you got to do this the right way. We're fighting for actually making America healthy again, not, just a little bit of making America healthy again, and then also giving immunity to the big pharma-owned, poisoners. I mean, think about this. Bayer owns Monsanto. Bayer's the one getting sued for the glyphosate. Bayer's also the one making the medicines that you take after you get poisoned from the glyphosate. Think about that. You think no one noticed that at Bayer? You think Bayer Pharmaceuticals and Bayer, agriculture, Bayer, you think they didn't realize, hey, if our stuff's making you sick and we can sell you the medicines that's going to cure it, that'll help profits? I mean, come on. We know exactly what's going on there. So we've got to make sure that we're fighting for MAHA holistically. End of the day, here's what's going on. We're making progress. We're moving forward. We're a long ways from where we need to be. MAHA is a very complex issue. Making America healthy again is a very complex thing. It's going to require state and federal legislation. It's going to require federal regulatory overhauls. It's going to require lawsuits. But the most important thing it's going to require is that we, the people, get involved, stay involved, be active, and fight for this. We've got to push. We've got to make sure that everyone knows that we're watching and that we're going to continue to fight. We either fight forward or we lose this fight forever. This is our best chance. We aren't going to get another one like this. Please support us. Please support what we're doing. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for everything. We will be back very soon.